Welcome back to LA Catholic Morning here on Archangel Radio. I'm Todd Sylvester here with Michelle McAloon, like the greats at the Command Center. On the line, we have Duncan Stroik, who is a professor of architecture at Notre Dame University, here to begin a series on the top 10 cathedrals or basilicas in the United States. Good morning, Duncan.
Good morning. Great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's incredible the work that you are doing, and then also that you're able to teach about, because I feel that sadly this has kind of become a lost art, especially in modern day. If someone were to say, now of course LA, I don't know what they were doing over there, but if they said, well, we've got $100 million to build a cathedral, that just doesn't happen very frequently nowadays, does it?
No, and what an amazing experience for an architect to work on a cathedral.
Although we've talked about the last time you were on how hard it would be, because if you said, well, we're going to take this on and it's going to take, let's say, 50 years to build, and, you know, if the architect, let's say, is in their 70s, they're thinking, I don't know if I'm going to be around.
Yeah, no, it's great works of art and great buildings, especially, take a long time. And there's a new book out actually on Michelangelo as an architect, and it talks about the 20 years at the end of his life, from about 70 years old till 89, that he dedicated his life mainly to architecture. And the main project was St. Peter's, and he did a lot. We can say that St. Peter's is very much reflects Michelangelo's church, even though, 10 great architects worked on it. But he was there for 20 years and was very instrumental in it. And yet he didn't see it complete. He didn't see the dome complete. But he set the foundations and set the planning and the drawings so that the next, his disciples and the next architects could follow that, which they chose to do, fortunately.
Duncan, before we start this series, why don't we talk about when cathedrals and churches are built? Let's talk about the large cathedrals. When the architectural plans are created, when people come together, what is it they want to achieve in the actual building of the cathedral? Now, we know the spiritual component. What is it that they want to achieve? Do they want to achieve a perfect sound? Do they want to achieve a perfect space? What do they hope to do with that space, especially something like, as what we're going to talk about, the National Basilica?
Yes, good point, Michelle. Well, people have come to the project with different visions, and that's fine. And I think the architect's role is to take the visions of the client, but also bring the vision of the church to that project. So it's, when you hire the architect, they should have the knowledge and wisdom to bring your needs and your desires together with what a cathedral should be. And a cathedral is a church. It's a Catholic church. It's a holy place, but it's also something more than your average church. It's the mother church of the diocese, and it should architecturally and liturgically and musically and artistically reflect that. And so it's got to be more than just a church that fulfills the needs of the bishop or the priests. It should do those, but should do even more. And that's the challenge for the architect.
Okay. So if you go into a lot of European cathedrals, it's very interesting. You have this bustling life there in middle of town squares. There's this, this chaos and vivacity of human life going outside, and you open that door and you walk into a space of silence and reflection. And it is such a contrast between what is, once you're inside the cathedral, and what is outside the cathedral.
That's a very good point. And you bring up crucial is the location of a cathedral. And Baltimore being our first cathedral and the first cathedral in America, finding a site that's appropriate for a holy place that people can get to, central to the city, central to maybe the state or the county. But then your point is that architecturally, we know it's a special place, and we go in, and it is. It is a place of refuge. It's a place of holiness in a world of commerce, busyness, maybe chaos. It's a place of peace and truth, and we should have a glimpse of the divine when we enter a church, and especially a cathedral.
But what's very different about the National Basilica is when you go up to it, and Todd, I know you've been up to it, it's almost peaceful going into it. And so it's a very different experience from maybe the European or the Baltimore, because you've got that beautiful campus, you've got that green grass. It's almost removed from the chaos of Washington, D.C., and you go into it, and it's even more peaceful.
Yes, no, that's a good point. And the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C., right next to the campus of Catholic University, is a magnificent building, built over many decades, finished in the 60s, and really well done. And it's our largest church. It's our largest building. It's not technically a cathedral, but you could say visually functions as a cathedral in the capital city. And you're right. In its placement in a large grassy sward on a college campus, which is very, laid out with a lot of space, on the edge of it's not in the downtown, it's on the edge. It feels more like maybe a pilgrimage church or a monastery, or, it is. It's a Marian shrine. So it does have that sense of a place to go to and get away maybe a little bit. But architecturally, it also has the qualities that we're looking for in a cathedral: large, vertical, with elements like towers and domes and spires and other elements that reach to the heavens. And so you can see it from far away. It's a monument in the city, a monument on the skyline. And that's what we want to do for cathedral. Cathedral isn't just the function inside, but it's also the outside. It's a witness. It's a beacon to the city and to all people, not just to Catholics, but to all people, to share hope and faith and love.
There is something amazing, too, of how these buildings come together and what they do to the human person, Duncan, because the first time I ever walked into the Basilica there of the Immaculate Conception on the campus of Catholic University, I was with a dear friend of mine who was teaching at the Dominican House of Studies. And it was myself and another gentleman, and it was our first time ever walking into that church. And he was so excited to point out 1,000 different things in there, because he had spent so many years there and had learned a great deal, and he wanted to transfer that knowledge, being a professor. And the other gentleman and I walked in, and we were so in awe that we both kind of disappeared into the building. And he was trying to point things out, and he's looking up, and he wanted to say something. And we're both in prayer, and literally tears rolling down our cheeks. And he was frustrated because he's like, well, guys, now's not the time. I want to show you all of these things. And it's like, no, the cathedral now has us. Like, we're in, or the Basilica, we're in the heart of the Basilica. And I think that's what the building is designed for, correct?
Yes. Well, you bring up a very interesting tension, which is a good tension, that a really great building and a really great cathedral is a place that you can talk about and look at and see all of these things and have an expert or historian or a scholar tell you about it, theologian, but it's also a place of prayer. So there's an interesting, it's both faith and reason. It's both visual and spiritual. And it's designed for you to be in awe, as Michelle said, silence, quiet, prayer, but also it's also a place of liturgy and music and, a lot of people. So, but this tension in great buildings between wanting to take a tour group in and share about how great this building is, and comparing that with the impulse of the faithful to want to search out a place to pray or sit in a pew or go to the Blessed Sacrament. That's a good tension, I would say. That's a good building. And a bad building doesn't draw you. It has, functionally, it has all these things, but does not draw you to prayer or to even to look up, because there isn't that much depth to it.
And that's been one of the great tragedies of some of the modern design of some of the churches, the Pizza Hut style church and those kind of things. Let's clean up some language here real quick. What's for our Protestant listeners, what is the difference between a basilica and a cathedral?
Okay, so basilica is a honor given to a building that has either had important historical events happen there, or it's of great architectural and artistic beauty, or it has other, let's say, historical honors for people. Important people are buried there. It's a place of pilgrimage. Famous icon is there. Let's say spiritual history. And so the church, after being petitioned, gives it this honorary title of basilica. And of course, that term comes from the early Christian churches, which are called basilicas. So it's a term of honor. And then a cathedral is, on the one hand, we think of cathedrals as grand, big, beautiful buildings. We think of Europe, which is the great place for cathedrals. But it is technically the place of the cathedra, the seat, which is the name for the seat or the throne of the bishop. So the cathedral is the seat of the bishop, and the bishop is a successor of the apostles, so it's the seat of the apostles, and it's supposed to be a sign or an image of this apostolic faith. So the basilica is an honorary term, and the cathedral is technically a term that describes the home or the seat of the bishop.
Okay, so something like the National Shrine, was it built as a cathedral? Obviously not. Or was it built with the goal to make it a basilica? Is there a purpose when the architect comes together and the plans come together? Is there a purpose laid out beforehand around these two ideas?
Yes, and they're related because often often basilicas and cathedrals are big buildings. They're beautiful buildings. They have great artwork. They're a place that draws people to visit. So they have a lot in common. And it's true that when people say, oh, the cathedrals of Europe, or they say the Cathedral of St. Peter's in Rome, they're not really wrong to say the Cathedral of St. Peter's in Rome, because what they mean is the great holy place. Technically, St. Peter's is not a cathedral. It's a basilica, because the Cathedral of Rome, the seat of the bishop, is at St. John Lateran. So they have a lot in common, and I don't have a problem with people kind of mixing them up, because the intention is clear. People see cathedrals and basilicas as great honorary buildings that are beautiful and should inspire people.
Okay, so we're because we're going to run out of time here. So what we will probably do is have you come on again, where we will talk about how we enter into the cathedral and what we want to look at architecturally, especially with the National Basilica. If you do not know what you're looking at, it's hard to understand what you're looking at. So hopefully we'll have you on next time, and we will talk specifically about the National Basilica and what our eyes are looking at when we go into a place of worship. How does that sound, Duncan?
That sounds great, Michelle. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It is such an honor for us. And stay tuned. LA Catholic Morning with Father Andrew Jones coming back up on the Sunday Gospel Reflection.